Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. Today is 16th January 2025 and today we have some important articles for the discussion, and along with all these important articles we also have one mains practice question. So this mains practice question is based on the current affairs which are being given in the newspaper. So the mains practice question today is it is about the trade deficit, the widening trade deficit and current account deficit in India. So based on this, we'll have one question and we'll also understand some reasons for the trade deficit or the capital account deficit and what would be the implications and how we could actually come out of this trade deficit, and that is also very important. So the question is, define trade deficit and the current account deficit, and what are the reasons for expanding trade and current account deficits of India, and then examine its implications on Indian economy. Now firstly, you need to define the trade deficit as well as the current account deficit as it is asked in the question. And in the second part of the question, you need to write some reasons for expanding trade and current account deficit in India. And in the third part of the answer, you need to examine the implications on India's economy. This trade deficit and current account deficit and implications of this on Indian economy. So you need to examine, right? And in fact, you can see on this image that you could understand what constitutes the current account, right? So in fact, current account constitutes trade in goods, trade in services, and in fact transfer payments as well, right? So trade in goods essentially comprises exports as well as imports of goods, and trade in services consists of net factor income, and net factor income essentially comprises net income from compensation of employees and net investment income, and then trade in services essentially comes net non-factor income such as shipping, banking, insurance, tourism, software services. So all these are different services, a part of trade in services. And transfer payments, so these transfer payments essentially comprises of gifts, remittances and grants as well. So as the question is being asked, first you need to briefly define what constitutes trade deficit as well as the current account deficit. Now in fact, when we define current account deficit, so it essentially occurs when a country's imports exceed its exports during a particular period of time, right? For example, a particular period of time. So how much a country has been importing and how much a country has been exporting, right? So the difference between that particular thing is known as a trade deficit. Now it is also called as trade surplus if country exports more than what it is importing. So that is what is called a trade surplus. But trade deficit essentially means that so whatever country is exporting, so that is lesser than whatever country has been importing, and it is also referred to as a negative balance of trade. So right, so this is known as a negative balance of trade. Now remember that in 1991 Indian economy faced balance of crisis, right? So balance of payment crisis. And in fact, current account deficit essentially means that it occurs when a total value of all goods and services a country imports that exceeds the total value of goods and services that a country exports, right? So that is what is known as the current account deficit. And in fact, the current account essentially includes net income. So net income such as interest, dividends, transfers, and even foreign aid as well. So although these components make up only a small percentage of the total current account, but these components are also part of the current account calculation, right? So this is the definition of the current account deficit. So it occurs when total value of goods and services a country imports exceeds the total value of goods and services it exports. And you need to write some reasons for increasing trade and current account deficit, and that is also very important, right? So because it is asked in the question. So what are the reasons for increasing trade and current account deficit? So one such reason is that rising imports in India is one reason for increasing trade deficit as well as current account deficit, because we actually depended a lot on imports rather than exporting things. For example, Chinese economy is an export based economy, but India's economy is not an export based economy. Rather, we are importing a lot of goods into India. So imports maintained their momentum due to countries' dependence on imported energy, electronic goods, and even certain machinery. For all those things, we have dependent on other countries. We have been importing all these essentials from other countries, and that's why Prime Minister Narendra Modi had given a call of Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? So he has given a call for Atmanirbhar Bharat, and that is a very important call to achieve self-reliance, right? So we would achieve self-reliance, and also we would reduce our import dependency, and that is also very important. Import dependency. And in fact, gems and jewelry exports, the second factor is gems and jewelry exports are being reduced in recent times. A contraction in the earnings from the export of gems and jewelry, organic and inorganic chemicals, and ready-made garments also contributed to the lowering export earnings by around $2.7 billion. So this is another factor which has been further widening or further deepening the current account deficit as well as trade deficit. And in fact, we all knew that India dependent on crude oil from other countries. More than 85% of our crude oil is being imported from other countries. So imports such as petroleum, crude products were up to 2% on sequential basis, and a massive 70.4% from a year ago. But generally India dependent on crude oil import from other countries. More than 85% of the crude oil is being imported from other countries. Now petroleum, crude and other products together accounted for about 32% of the import bill, right? So it might have been higher in Indian refineries which were not buying Russian crude oil. Okay, so when you are importing crude oil from other countries, because India is one of the fastest growing major economy, it is an emerging economy, you require a lot of crude oil to sustain your economic growth, economic development. So India, since it has depended a lot on foreign countries, when you are importing crude oil, you need to pay a higher amount of forex reserves for sourcing crude oil, right? That is also another major factor that could deepen or further widen trade deficit or current account deficit. And apart from that, we should also talk about coal imports, right? So coal imports were also another transaction that contributed to the import bill and also widening trade deficit this financial year. So these are some factors which have been contributing for the widening of trade deficit and current account deficit. And in the next part of the answer, you need to write about the implications of this trade deficit and current account deficit deepening on Indian economy. So this part of the answer also you should write. Okay, so in fact, there is a less room for a fiscal policy stimulus to support growth given high deficit and debt levels, right? So in fact, fiscal policy stimulus cannot be given in an economy where it has been experiencing higher levels of fiscal deficit and where it has been experiencing higher levels of inflation. That will not be good for the economy as a whole, and that's why it is being said that it has a lesser room for the fiscal policy stimulus. Secondly, large current account deficit. So if we have a large current account deficit, so that will result in the demand for the foreign currency, right? So increasing demand for the foreign currency would result in depreciation of rupee value, right? So depreciation of rupee value means whatever we have been importing, so we need to pay more, right? So whatever we have been importing, for example, if we are importing crude oil, we need to pay more amount of the forex reserve that we have, and consequently that would further result in depreciating rupee value as well, right? So this is how it would further deepen the trade deficit or the current account deficit. And in fact, nations balance current account deficit by attracting capital inflows, right? For example, so imagine any countries having a huge trade deficit or if it has a huge trade deficit, or if it is facing the current account deficit. So in that case, countries would attract capital inflows through foreign direct investment or even foreign portfolio investments. So if they can attract foreign portfolio investments and foreign direct investments, so they could actually bridge the widening trade deficit or current account deficit. And apart from that, as I have already told you, that it would further weaken the value of Indian currency, and weakening value of Indian currency would also result in increasing inflation. For example, imagine that we have been importing crude oil, 85% of the crude oil that we have been importing from other countries. Now, while importing that a huge amount of crude oil, in case we need to pay more to import this crude oil because of a widening trade deficit, declining rupee value, we need to pay more for this crude oil. Now in that case, the increased crude oil import prices would be passed on to the consumers as well. Now consumers need to pay more to purchase petrol, diesel, so such kind of a fossil fuels. Now in this case, inflation would increase enormously. In fact, for Indian economy, inflation is also already one of the key concern on which the Monetary Policy Committee has been working on. But rising inflation is not good for any economy, because it would lead to the economic growth slowdown. Otherwise, it would also lead to the recession as well. And apart from that, if an increase in the import bill, if any country has been importing more foreign goods than what it actually exports, so it is because sometimes countries may import the technology, or technology intensive machinery, or those imports would facilitate technological upgradation. So that would help in the long term development of the country, right? So that would actually give yield or dividends in the longer term. They wouldn't be potentially harmful for the economy, but they give dividends in the longer term. And increasing imports is accompanied by an expansion in industrial production, and it is a sign of economic development as well, right? For example, we are importing more. So along with importing, so if we are focused on expanding our domestic industries, because domestic industries would also give a push to more production and gainful employment opportunities, we could export more, and our exports would become more and more competitive. And apart from that, we could also earn a crucial forex reserves. So this is also another way through which we could bridge the deepening or widening trade deficit or current account deficit, right? However, essentially the focus should be on achieving self-reliance. So we should stop importing unnecessary goods from other countries. So that is the one way. And second way is achieving self-reliance, right? So self-reliance on key supplies, and that is also very important. And thirdly, currency swap agreements will also ensure that this trade deficit or current account deficit would not widen further. So all these measures have to be undertaken step by step by the government, and in this context all relevant and necessary stakeholders have to be engaged, so that we could control trade deficit and current account deficit as well. But essentially we should reduce our dependence on imports of other goods and services, particularly the non-essential goods. So today we have some important news articles as well. The first important news article is about India-US nuclear partnership. So we'll try to discuss about this as well. So first try to understand the context, and then we'll understand this. So the context is that United States Bureau of Industry and Security, which is also called as BIS, Bureau of Industry and Security, has removed 3 Indian nuclear entities. We'll understand what are those 3 nuclear entities. So these are Indian nuclear entities. So first one is Baba Atomic Research Center, BARC, and second one is Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research, and third one is the Indian Rare Earths Limited. So these are 3 Indian nuclear entities, and US Bureau of Industry and Security has removed these three Indian nuclear entities from its entity list. So we'll understand what exactly is an entity list. So we'll try to understand that aspect as well. So US Bureau of Industry and Security has removed these three Indian nuclear entities in order to enhance civilian nuclear cooperation between the two countries. Remember that both India and US have a civil nuclear cooperation agreement. So we already signed a civil nuclear cooperation agreement. So therefore it is a very important from the point of view of US to have a strong civilian nuclear cooperation with India as well, and because of that reason, so these Indian nuclear entities have been removed from that particular list. Now we'll understand what is exactly US entity list. So US entity list is a list and which essentially consisting of foreign individuals, businesses, organizations, and all these entities which are being part of a particular list, and that are subject to export restrictions, right? So those individuals, businesses, and entities or organizations are subjected to export restrictions if they are part of this particular entity list of US, and they also require certain licenses as well for export of certain goods and the technologies. And in fact, as I have already told you, that the list is being compiled by Bureau of Security. Okay, so Bureau of Security of the US Department of Commerce, right? So this BIS of US Department of Commerce actually prepares US entity list, right? So this is the organization, so that prepares US entity list, and in this list there are certain individuals, organizations, and businesses, and if they are part of the list, so those entities would be subjected to export restrictions as well as licensing requirements as well, right? So in fact, this entity list that is being prepared by BIS will be used to prevent unauthorized trade in items that could be diverted to terrorism, weapons of mass destruction programs, or other activities that are being perceived by the US as going against foreign policy or national security interests, right? So if US believes that any of these organizations, individuals, or businesses or other entities have been promoting terrorism and they are manufacturing weapons of mass destruction, so in that case a certain restrictions would be imposed on those organizations, right? So regulations or restrictions in the sense that they require license for certain goods and technologies if they plan to import or export, and even there are certain export restrictions as well. Now what is the impact of move? The move is that three Indian nuclear entities are they are being removed from the US entity list. So that essentially means that now these three entities of India no longer require no longer put under the restrictions, and they also don't require the licensing requirements as well. So the move will allow much more closer cooperation between United States of America and India, right? Because it is very important to secure more resilient critical minerals that will benefit both these countries and clean energy supply chains as well, right? So because nuclear fuel is now considered as one of the cleanest form of energy, and in this context India is the third largest consumer of fossil fuels. So it is important to make sure that India should switch over to renewables, and developed countries also have the commitment to help these developing countries switch over to the renewables. And strategically also it is very important because of China's threat. Because of this particular reason, both India and USA have been engaging more closely in this arena, and the amendment to the export controls list would allow the affected entities to enter into deeper collaboration. So all these three entities would enter into deeper collaboration with US, its private sector, and its scientists and technologies in order to further enhance civilian nuclear cooperation between Indian entities as well as US entities, right? So I hope you have understood this. And next article is China's expansionist strategy and its implications for India. So we'll try to understand this aspect as well. So recently the news has been coming out that China has been building world's largest dam on Brahmaputra river, and how it would impact the natural water flows into India. And there are also threats like flood like situation or reduced amount of water for India. So we'll try to understand this as well, right? So recent developments along the India-China border, right, particularly the line of actual control, we knew about that, with respect to the Doklam conflict in the year 2017, and then Galwan Valley clashes in the year 2020. So we have experienced this. So they have a heightened tensions with China's actions, including constructing a new dam on the Brahmaputra, and also creating a new counties in Ladakh, challenging India's territorial integrity and sovereignty. So these are China's recent moves that have been challenging India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And another attempt on the part of China which has resulted in challenging India's sovereignty and territorial integrity is the China-Pakistan economic corridor, because this China-Pakistan economic corridor is also passing through the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and that is also subjected to violation of sovereignty and territorial integrity of India. And in fact, these incidents at the border areas and about the Brahmaputra river and even in Ladakh region, so along with China's broader regional expansionism or its expansionist strategy, its more assertive stance, have raised alarms about both water security as well as territorial disputes in South Asia region, because it may have implications for water security in South Asia region. So if China builds a dam, right, so it is also said that the future wars are water wars, right? Now the transboundary water issues and the strategic concerns which are being associated with this transboundary water issues. And in fact, as we have already discussed, that this Brahmaputra river, so which is known as Yarlung Jangbo river in the Tibet region, China has been planning to construct a massive hydropower dam on this Yarlung Jangbo river. And in fact, if China builds that Yarlung Jangbo river, that could potentially reduce water flow into the downstream countries, and that would potentially threaten agriculture, fisheries, biodiversity in India and Bangladesh as well. So availability of water would be under question, and the livelihoods of the people, and also the settlements across the Brahmaputra river, because if China suddenly releases excess amount of water, that would result in increasing vulnerability of those areas to floods as well. And in fact, the potential for devastating floods during monsoon seasons or even during geopolitical tensions also, China may release excess amount of water downstream, and that could potentially create a flood-like situation, because the dam's water release presents a significant strategic concern for India in future, right? So we could say that this is part of China's assertive move. And in fact, India is also accelerating its own hydropower projects in number of states, particularly in northeastern part of India, to counteract potential water shortages and also mitigate risks which are being posed by Chinese dam. So however, experts according to experts, it is being believed that most of the water in the Brahmaputra river is being the catchment area of the Brahmaputra area. Brahmaputra river is located in the northeastern part of India. So therefore, even if China builds a dam on Yarlung in Tibet region, so that would not potentially impact India's water availability. But one concern is about floods. So therefore, China may use it to its advantage in case any geopolitical tensions between these two countries, and any other reason as well during the monsoon season also. And apart from that, we should also focus on border disputes and cartographic aggression of China, because China's actions such as creation of new counties and even renaming some of the places in Arunachal Pradesh. Now, China has been regularly doing this. China is renaming some places in Arunachal Pradesh to assert its claim that Arunachal Pradesh is being part of China, but that's a false claim. Arunachal Pradesh will always remain part of India, and this is a potential assertive claim by China, right? So in fact, China currently has been following the strategy of cartographic aggression to assert territorial control, particularly in Ladakh and even Arunachal Pradesh as well. So this strategy that China has been renaming some of the places in Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh is being called as strategy of cartographic aggression. And in fact, despite China's territorial assertions, international law actually requires effective administrative control and sovereignty, making China's cartographic actions legally unsubstantiated. And apart from that, China's ongoing strategy, the strategy of cartographic aggression and even establishing settlements in disputed regions, further complicates the relations, or further complicates the existing relations between India and China, and it complicates India's efforts to maintain territorial integrity, sovereignty, despite its legal sovereignty over the areas. Now, there's no doubt that India has the sovereignty over Arunachal Pradesh, but the assertive claims of China on these areas would further complicates India's territorial integrity as well as the sovereignty. And in fact, we should understand South Asia's bilateral engagement with China. So we knew that China follows the policy of string of pearls, where China has a military, I would say naval bases in different parts. For example, Gwadar port in Pakistan, very close to Chabahar port, very close to the western part of India, and even in Sri Lanka also Hambantota port it has acquired. In Maldives also it has a strategic presence. And apart from that, in different areas China has been gradually increasing its prominence or increasing its presence. So that has been threatening the traditional dominant role of India in the Indian Ocean region and within South Asia's region. So therefore, I would say that Chinese presence has been substantially increasing. So unlike Southeast Asian countries, the South Asian nations, including India, address their concerns with China individually due to the power imbalance. So in fact, there existing a huge power imbalance between South Asian countries and China. So because of that particular reason, they have been trying to address these issues between India and China bilaterally. And India, we all knew that in South Asia is a dominant regional power, and that should actually spearhead, that should actually lead the collective response to China's territorial and water related disputes to strengthen South Asia's position. And in fact, a unified approach is required. So this unified approach should involve diplomatic engagement, regional cooperation, and that would further enhance South Asia's capacity to counter Chinese assertiveness and ensure regional security. For India, ensuring regional security is very important, and we need to counter Chinese assertive stance with respect to protecting India's territorial integrity and sovereignty. So therefore, India should follow a unified approach, and this unified approach should involve both diplomatic engagement as well as regional cooperation with multiple like-minded countries. For example, Quad is a one such grouping where like-minded countries have come together against the assertive policies of China, right? So the next article is, recently Supreme Court held that clean public toilets, access to clean public toilets, is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, clean public toilets are fundamental right. So Supreme Court of India has delivered a significant judgment, right? So in this judgment, the Supreme Court has held that access to clean public toilets a basic right, and also it is very important and essential for human dignity. And Article 21 of the Indian Constitution talks about right to life and personal liberty. It talks about right to life and personal liberty, so that we knew about this. And therefore access to clean public toilets is a basic right under Article 21. And in fact, this decision of the Supreme Court comes as part of a broader effort to address sanitation issues and also ensure that public toilets are available, accessible, and even maintained for everyone regardless of any gender or any disability. Now we knew that Article 21 of the Indian Constitution is a very broader fundamental right, and Supreme Court has been widening its scope, right? For example, right to privacy is also part of this particular Article 21. And apart from right to privacy, right to education, right to clean environment, so all these things are being part of the Article 21. So it is a wider fundamental right. And recently the Supreme Court has also held that clean public toilets is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. And in fact, the Supreme Court has held that toilets are considered as a facet of human rights, and the failure of the state to provide these toilet facilities, access to the toilets adequately in courts, actually reflects a deeper flaw in the judicial system, right? So it actually reflects a deeper flaw if judiciary or the state not able to provide access to toilets irrespective of gender or disability. And the Supreme Court has also emphasized that having access to clean and functional toilets is not just a matter of convenience, but it is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution that guarantees right to life and also the personal liberty as well. So this right also includes the need for safe and hygienic environment, especially in public places like courts, tribunals, and even high courts as well. And the Supreme Court judgment specifically talked about the need for gender sensitive toilets, and these gender sensitive toilets should cater to all people irrespective of gender, irrespective of disability, right? So there should be no discrimination, but everyone should have access to the toilet facilities, and that is what the Supreme Court has been emphasizing on. So that includes men, women, and persons with disability, and even the transgender persons as well. And it has also highlighted the absence of basic sanitation facilities. So toilets are not properly maintained or managed, and that undermines the welfare state model as well. So we all knew that the directive principles of state policy talked about the welfare state, right? So directive principles of state policy's objective is social and economic justice. Social and economic justice is the objective of the welfare state model. So that's supposed to provide essential services to almost all citizens irrespective of any discrimination. So therefore the Supreme Court has rightly directed for a separate toilet facilities to be constructed for all genders, especially in courts and even tribunal buildings as well. So however, here we'll understand some of India's sanitation policies that have been launched and that are being successfully implemented as well, essentially aimed at enhancing access to sanitation and hygiene and even toilet facilities as well. So we all knew about the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So it is a massive cleanliness drive. It is also known as Jan Andolan. So it is also called as Clean India Mission. So we all knew that it was launched in 2014 by the NDA government, and this is a nationwide campaign, a Jan Andolan, to eliminate open defecation or to make India open defecation free, and also ensure that every household has access to a toilet. And Jal Shakti Abhiyan, so that is water power mission, so it was started in the year 2019, right? So this mission essentially aimed at addressing water scarcity that several districts have been already facing as per Niti Aayog report, and also improve the water conservation, or water conservation is very important. So when we achieve water conservation, then we would be essentially protected from the water scarcity as well. However, Jal Shakti Abhiyan focuses on 5 key areas. Now what are those 5 key areas that Jal Shakti Abhiyan would focus on? So harvesting rainwater, tapping rainwater and then harvesting it, renovating old water bodies, and reusing treated wastewater, interlinking rivers, and recharging of groundwater. So these are the 5 areas where the Jal Shakti Abhiyan would essentially focus on. So community-led total sanitation, and this approach actually involves communities taking responsibility for their own sanitation needs as well. And apart from that, we need to talk about the e-toilets, so which is also another program that has been launched by the government. So e-toilets is a self-cleaning eco-friendly toilets which are being installed in public places, and they automatically clean and disinfect themselves after the usage, and therefore it would ensure hygiene without needing any sort of manual cleaning. And apart from that, so World Toilet Day has been announced, or it is being celebrated every year on November 19. On November 19, World Toilet Day is being celebrated, and it is an official United States observance, and that aimed at raising global awareness and also action to address the urgent sanitation crisis as well. So these are some sanitation policies that aimed at enhancing access to sanitation and hygiene, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our class, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.